Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. I have with me today Heidi Fiedler. I hope I pronounced it right. It was a writer, editor, and creative coach. She dreams up cozy stories for kids and also writes about creativity and motherhood. Heidi lives with her family and her favorite books in Massachusetts. All right, Heidi, nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on my podcast. We have a lot to talk about: writing, motherhood, children's books, all of that. So, Heidi, so you are a creative coach. What does that mean?
I sometimes describe it as therapy for writers.
Okay.
It's about the emotional side of writing, or another way to think about it is it's a chance for us to talk about everything outside of the manuscript. So I had a lot of people hiring me for manuscript critiques, and I would talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the manuscript itself. But there's so much that goes into being a writer where you're making these decisions. You feel very alone. There's a lot of stress around the publishing process. It's a chance to talk about all of that. Sometimes people send me a bunch of ideas and we just kind of talk through them and figure out what would make the most sense to work on next. Sometimes we're talking about should they break up with their agent, or should they try a new genre, or is there some way to save this manuscript that they've submitted and gotten a ton of feedback on and still don't know what to do with. So it's all that kind of messy, open-ended stuff that does not belong in a manuscript critique.
Interesting. So you're like the creative or the book therapist, right?
Kind
So
of, yeah. And sometimes it's more like a straightforward coaching, like someone has an idea, they need accountability and check-ins, and someone to just sort of read their work more frequently than someone might if they were booking a critique at the end of a first draft. But yeah, it I think of it more as all the all the kind of heavy personal parts of being a writer that maybe you don't talk about with your agent or your editor or even your critique group, because it just feels vulnerable and you kind of wonder, are you the only person that is struggling with these things?
interesting. And how do you get clients? And how do clients find about you? And how many people are actually willing to sign up for these kind of services? I'm just curious.
It's a good question. I think there's no urgency around it. There's no one
Yeah.
saying this is something you have to do. But I have all different clients. Like some are totally new writers that just they've been successful in other parts of their lives and they just want to make progress quickly, so they like working with coaches in all different parts of their lives. And then I've had other writers that are more experienced, award winning writers, but they need someone to talk to that is not part of their regular world. And I think a lot of my clients come to me through word of mouth. I taught editing classes for a really long time, so I think there's sort of a network of editors that are referring people. I work with publishers, and like those connections with those in-house editors have brought in clients. I'm not someone that knows how to market in a way that says I'm going to tell you to buy X and so people buy X. I think marketing is a really long game, and I never know exactly where anyone's coming from or when they will come. But
Yeah.
it seems to be it wasn't a service I offered originally. It's something I've offered now that I'm farther into freelance life, and there was demand for something that was not just a critique.
Interesting. So how does your day to day look like?
Um, my day to day is very constrained by my son's schedule when he's in school, and usually I spend a couple hours in the morning after I drop him off, taking a walk, tidying up the house, doing life stuff. Then I have a few hours of client work. Um, Somewhere in there, I try and do a little bit of my own personal projects. And then it's time to pick them up again. So usually it does not feel like I have enough time to work, but I've gotten into the rhythm of it over time.
Mm, mm. And you're also a children's writer, correct? A children's author. So, how many books have you published, and where do you get these ideas for
Hmm.
writing these books?
Don't know how many I've published with my name on it, maybe 8, 10.
Okay.
Those were like nonfiction books several years ago. And I've been working more on fiction picture books in the last few years. And for me, I read a lot of picture books, so I'm getting ideas from what I'm reading. I'm getting ideas from my son and daily life. I feel inspired by walks outside and time in nature. And um, I love when I read something, whether it's a picture book or it's something more for adults, that's surprising. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that when you write. I think that's really exciting. And I'm always kind of playing around with those things in my own work. I am not a, like, I am not the most commercial, um, straightforward writer. I tend to get like a lot of feedback that's like, "Oh, this is really poetic and beautiful," and we're not always sure how to sell it because
Mm,
it's so beautiful and poetic.
hmm. Interesting. So, all the books that you published, did you use publishers? Did you self-publish? What was your publishing journey like? Did you have to find an agent? If you can walk us through your publishing journey.
Yeah, I'm on my fourth agent, so I've had
Oh
several
wow.
agents, and I've also done a lot of work for hire projects. So that's when a publisher is kind of commissioning someone to do something. They have an idea and they think we will hire someone to write this book. So a
Okay.
lot of times I'm not pitching the idea, I'm more being hired to execute the idea. Um, but then there are other times where I will create something from scratch and my agent will pitch it and submit it and it goes out to the world. But yeah, for agents in, it's not a straightforward journey by any means.
So one of the things that people really struggle with, especially aspiring writers, is finding agents, right? So how did you manage to get all these agents? What's
um,
what's your secret?
well, I am a big advocate for not being too precious about the process. I think a
Okay.
lot of writers get kind of hung up on the idea that they're supposed to find the right agent and they're supposed to like comb through like interviews or some little blurb online and find like something that is aligned or makes you think, oh, this is the right person for me. And then you're supposed to reach out to one person at a time and um, be very, I don't know, thoughtful and like considered with the process. And if that works for you, I think that's great. But I think it makes a lot of writers get stuck where they are
Mm,
like sort of paralyzed and no one feels like a great fit, or it feels like there's like maybe 3 people in the world that fit your criteria and they've already said no. I think it's more productive to send your work out to anyone that might be qualified. So for me, like I've looked for agents that are going to represent both adult and children's. I don't care what their personality looks like or what they say online that they're looking for necessarily. If they say they will represent adult and children's, I'll take that as a sign that they might represent my work. And that, I mean, that's already narrowed the field so much. So I also think like people get so hung up on like someone will give like a manuscript wish list where they're saying like, oh, I'm looking for this kind of book, and then they'll hear later like, well, I'll know it when I see it. There's no way anyone could predict exactly what they're looking for, and just because
yeah.
they are looking for this one thing doesn't mean they aren't looking for your thing. So I would cast a really wide net and be patient with the process, expecting that you could query 50 agents, 100 agents, and that doesn't mean doesn't really mean anything about your work. It just means that there's only so many people in the world that can represent the kind of work you do, and you need to get your work in front of them. They won't know who you are unless you try. And you don't want to say no to yourself before someone else has said no. Let them just either ignore your email or say no, and there's no
Yeah.
harm that comes from that. I think sometimes too there's like the emotional sting of feeling rejected, and I guess there is an element of rejection in there, but I think if you can get yourself to a mental place where you feel like you don't really care, you're not going to take it personally each time you get a no, you will start moving through
Mm.
and just get to a yes faster.
Hmm. So, do you think we need an agent now? I mean, there's a lot of the publishing world changed dramatically, and a lot of people that I talk to who've been previously traditionally published are moving towards self-publishing for many reasons, like the self-control or the overall control of your product, higher royalties, all of that. So, where do you stand when it comes to traditional publishing versus self publishing?
I think you definitely need an agent if you are pursuing traditional publishing. It's There are people that do it without it, but it's so much harder. And for me, the way you decide if you want to do traditional publishing or self-publishing is how much do you want to be in charge of distribution and
Mm,
shipping, because you are probably going to still be responsible for marketing to a large degree even if you are going with traditional publishing. You don't have to sell in person, you don't have to be the sales rep, but there's still a lot that goes into marketing. So I used to say, like, are you a person that wants to market, sell, and distribute your book? Now I just say, are you a person that wants to distribute your book? Because there are so many logistics involved with that. If you're a person that's not scared off by that, then I think you can you can make it work for you and you can feel really pleased with that process. But there are also some people that just they don't need that part of it in their life, and they need someone else to handle all the parts that happen after the book is written and produced.
hmm. Have you ever self published?
I have not, but I have been thinking about it more in recent years. It has felt like an option that there were a lot of reasons I wrote it off, not because I thought it was so like I thought it was less than, but it was more because it required so much investment up front. And I think now there are ways to do it with print on demand, and I think there are different ways to distribute and get your book into stores than there used to be. So I am intrigued by that, but I think it's still um, there's a big learning curve, and it's still like I'm trying to think of self-publishing with the mindset of like people that are producing chapbooks or zines or like putting on an art show. Like it's about getting your work out in the world. It's not necessarily about making a ton of money. It could be if you are fortunate and you have a niche and you have an audience and all of that, but if you don't, like it's still worth getting your work out in the world and saying I wrote a book and I made this.
Hmm. I want to ask about audience. What is your way of building an audience for your work or for even an audience for clients? What do you do to build that audience? What are your tactics?
That's a complicated question. Yeah. Well, for readers, I think it's tricky for a lot of children's book writers. You're not going to be marketing directly to your readers. You're probably marketing to teachers, book buyers, maybe librarians, possibly parents. Um, and a lot of what it feels like in the beginning, I think, is that you're marketing to other writers because it's other writers that care about books, and you guys kind of cheer each other on. You get to know a community of writers, and it feels sometimes like I'm just marketing to other writers. What is the point? except that most of those other writers are also parents, or they know parents, or they're teachers, or they're librarians also. And there's actually more crossover than it seems like there is. And the same thing, like when I started writing essays about creativity or motherhood, at first I was thinking like, oh, is this a different audience, and like, how do I reach this audience, and how do you even market an essay, what does that mean? And then I realized like the same people that were interested in my work before are still interested in my work. They're multidimensional people just like I am, and a lot of the things we connected on before are also of interest to them, like moving forward. I just did a survey for my newsletter earlier this year, and I was I had combined like audiences where before I'd done a lot of teaching to editors. I had a lot of editors in my newsletter audience. I had some writers. I assumed I had some parents. I don't know, but I asked like, which of these things do you identify? And it was obviously, it was like the most obvious answer. It was like, we are writers. We want to write picture books. We are also mothers. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that's me too. But it was like I needed to see it in a survey to be like, oh yeah, you can be all those things, and it's actually not that complicated. People can handle if you talk about a few different things.
So you're saying most of your audience are authors who are mothers?
Yeah, I have a lot of writer moms in my audience, and I have a lot of editors that want to be writers. That's like a niche within a niche where, like, if you become
Yeah.
an editor, a lot of times it's hard to kind of shake off that editor voice and become a writer. And then I have like probably some writers that are not moms but want to become moms one day, or that's not like that wasn't a part of my identity when I started becoming a writer, um, but it's just evolved with me.
So, looking at your bio and your work, I realized that you focus on something called creative mom writers, or the relationship between motherhood and creativity. What is that exactly? Do you think mothers are become more creative when they have kids, or do kids actually kill your creativity? So I'm curious to hear about your approach toward like motherhood and creativity.
Yeah, for me personally, I had less time, less energy when I became a mom, and yet I wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep writing. It felt more important to me than ever. I felt like I was kind of more creatively ambitious
Mm,
because I didn't want to work on anything that didn't feel meaningful to me. And it wasn't like everything had to be serious or like um super successful. It was more like I don't want to work on something that doesn't feel creatively fulfilling. And I think, I mean, there's so many layers to it. I think parents in general are naturally creative. They need to be to raise children. There's so much improvisation and problem solving that happens in parenting, and also the way you play with your children comes through that connection. Um, but I also think like we so often think of our creative practice as something we need to do. It's like a task on our list, and it kind of feels heavy. But when you are a mom, especially, I think that working on something creative can really be life giving and energizing. And even if it's just like a tiny pocket of your day, 10 minutes, can really help you feel rejuvenated and also just like more connected to yourself, more empowered with your own vision. That's one of the reasons I like writing, is that it makes me feel like I'm the one that gets to decide what these words are. I'm the one that gets to decide what this final piece looks like. And that feels like more important to me than it ever did before, because there's so much of my day to day that is not about my own wants or needs. And it's nice
yeah.
that I can come back to over and over.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to go back to you being the book therapist, and what are the things that authors struggle with the most in terms of like the friction that they face when they're starting to write, and How do you walk them through it?
I think one big thing that a lot of people struggle with is it boils down to wanting to go faster or feeling some pressure that they should be efficient at it. And I think this is true for more experienced writers too. Sometimes even especially because you feel like I should know what I'm doing. I should be able to just knock this book out. Why is this taking so long? Um, and it was something I really struggled with too, of like feeling like I didn't want to work on draft 6, 7, 8. I wanted to be done. Like I liked starting new projects, and I didn't always like the work that was needed to finish a project. And for me and my clients, I think it helps to take that pressure off and to remember almost everything out in the world has gone through many, 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 many drafts, and there really is no efficient way to write a book. Maybe if you're writing like the most straightforward nonfiction book where you write like an outline and you're just like filling in the pieces, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of creative writing, the real creative part of it happens in this sort of messy, dreamy, early stage, and you don't know where the book is going, and you are gathering inspiration, and you're kind of putting new things together and seeing what sticks. And if you try to force that stage to like hurry up and like take shape so you can just get your book done, you lose so much of the original work that you can bring to this project. And your final product, maybe it comes out faster, but it is not better. And
Mm.
it also does not make you enjoy the process anymore, which I think the more you can enjoy actually spending time writing, the more you'll write. And also, the more you're going to be able to come back to it when life is bumpy and busy and intense. It's a lot of times the people that I work with, we're putting pressure on ourselves to keep writing no matter what, even when life is like just so overwhelming. And that's just not realistic, and it's also not needed. I think when you give yourself permission to take real breaks and then go back to it, but also just not rushing to the finish line, you will create something that surprises you and feels truly creative and exciting and makes you want to keep going and going.
Hmm. Hmm. So, because it's interesting what you said about people want to rush it, because there's a lot of kind of pressure for you to keep producing as an author. And then, and even you look at people like Stephen King or Brandon Sanderson, and these people are like writing machines. They like one book after the other. I mean, and some people see them as their idols. And to think of somebody like Stephen King, who, I don't know, one book a year, or sometimes two books a year, or the same with Brandon Sanderson. Do you think this is confusing aspiring authors, that they think this is the pace that they should follow?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, probably the same as like, following um, like a fitness instructor who looks amazing.
Mm, mm,
Like their whole day is working out and like getting a perfect smoothie, and they have their lives set up to be as healthy and as strong as possible, which is amazing for them. But most of us do not have that privilege to do that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't take our 20-minute walk or like enjoy taking the 20-minute walk. It just means we shouldn't compare ourselves to that outcome. And I think, I don't know, every detail of their lives, but I'm guessing that those authors have been working at that pace since they were young, and they have infrastructure built into their lives that allows them to spend huge portions of their day doing that. Um, And most of us don't, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't make progress. Slow progress is still progress. And also another thing I like to remind myself is that they talk about I think it's Cal Newport's deep work book, but he talks about like there's a limit to how much real work anyone's going to get done in a day. So if you have 2 hours, that's okay. That's still quite a bit of time to make actual progress on your project. And your job is not to just churn stuff out, especially in the age of AI. Like, that can happen. Like, you as a human being do not need to be the one to just churn content out.
Mm,
If you are writing something unique that no one else can write in the world, like, that's going to take time. It just will.
mm, hmm. Interesting. Do you believe in writer's block?
Mm. Like, are you thinking like a block that would last like a really long time? I think lots of people probably feel it like a little resistance and a little like, what am I doing? Like almost every time they sit down while
Yeah.
I'm but in terms of like being blocked for like months or years, I think that's probably like you're getting in your head about it, and there are ways to kind of unlock that. But I think one of those ways is knowing like almost everyone feels that little like when they sit down and are like, okay, let's do this.
So what would you tell your client if they tell you like I cannot write, I'm like blocked every time I look at my computer, I just stare at it. What would you tell them?
The first thing I would say is probably stay away from your computer. If you want, you could get a notebook and like write way less than you think is writing. Like write one word down. Write a list of words that kind of relate to your topic. Journal about your book or your project. Think about like how would you describe it to a friend, or what kind of thoughts and feelings do you want to leave with the reader. You can also do voice memos, or like actually just talking with a friend, a writer friend, talking it through. Like all of that, I think can be really productive. I think when you sit down at your computer, it's so tempting to suddenly be in revision mode, even though you're like not even close to revising. Like it's easy to be like, oh, I'm just gonna back up and like tinker with that word, and that is gonna lock you into feeling stressed and like there's no way you're going to figure this out. I personally like to stay in my notebook as long as possible and just give myself permission to write down anything that may or may not even be connected to my idea, and then trust that I will sort it out later.
So would you tell them to dedicate a time every day, or would you tell them just write when the inspiration strikes?
If dedicating a time every day works for you, I think that's great. Um, I have not found that to work for my schedule, but I would encourage people to look for opportunities. Like I do a lot of my writing in the car while I'm waiting for my son, or like 10 minutes
How
before I have to leave the house. um,
how do you do that? Do
I'll
you
just have my notebook with me, or even like in my phone, I'll write in the reminders app and then I'll transfer it later. Um,
interesting.
for me, a lot of it is like mentally staying with the project wherever I am, and then writing it in my phone, writing it in my notebook, writing it on post it, and bringing it all together when I can sit down at my computer or actually like put it in order. But getting that idea down and kind of staying in touch with the project helps me.
Hmm. What are you working on these days?
Mm. That's a really good question. I have a new picture book idea that I'm working on. I'm taking notes on it. And I have a bunch of essays that I would like to um, draft. I've already started thinking ahead to the summer when my son will be out of school, and so I've got like goals where I'm like, I want to get this at least to this point, and then during the summer I can send things out or revise or whatever. But at least getting like the shape of things down would be really good.
Hmm. What about in terms of the business side of writing, like your coaching? Do you have any programs coming up? Do you have what do you what?
Hmm. Well, I don't know if this counts as a coaching program, but on Substack, I have a Substack called Nebula Notebook. I am hosting a book club inspired by Oliver Berkman's work. I don't know if you've read 4,000 Weeks and Meditations for Mortals. The people that love his work really love his work. And
Oh,
so
really? Interesting. Okay.
it, it's also extremely relevant to creatives. I've been reading through each chapter sort of with that lens of how does this apply to writing or to creativity. And so on Substack, we're having a private little group where I'll post something, there's some questions, some journal prompts, and it's open to all creatives that are feeling drawn
Hmm.
to his work. And you can read along. I think that would be fun, but also like you could just read the post and respond to the questions. You don't have to be like super caught up on the books. But yeah, if you're at all an Oliver Berkman fan, I would check it out because it's been like really fun to connect with other fans too. The people that are into that way of thinking are like philosophical and chatty and friendly, and it's been a really good group.
Hmm. I want to ask you about Substack and writing. So, where do you see Substack evolving? Do you see it as a place where all writers should be? Like, I'm on Substack and I love being there. But like as an author who wants to publish books, build an audience, how do you crack the Substack code? Because sometimes you post and you get crickets. Sometimes I mean it's I don't know if I want to ask you how do you crack the code? How did you crack the code?
Well, I had a MailChimp list for a really long time. And then
Ah,
I started writing about creativity and motherhood. I had a book that was going out on submission. And like another friend who had written a nonfiction book was like, I kind of think Substack's the place to be for writers. You should try it. So I first joined Substack kind of lurking and just kind of getting a feel for the culture and like what are people talking about? How do people like trade notes and that kind of thing. Um, and then I found that there's a lot of moms on Substack. I actually wrote a post, "Why are all the writer moms on Substack?" And there's a lot of literary conversations and also fun stuff, like more of like the meme kind of conversations you might have other places. Um, my experience has been very positive in that like I always think of, if you want to think of it as marketing or like building your business, as like joining new circles. So like I might have a circle of people that are editor friends, I might have a circle of people that are children's book writer friends, I might have a circle of people that are mom friends, I might have a circle of people that are business people that I know in other industries. Substack was a whole other circle for me. I felt like I got a new boost in my audience. There's really great discovery with the way they promote your newsletter to other people. I've gained more people in the newsletter list than I had like any other year since having a newsletter. So it's been really great.
how many
Um,
subscribers do you have, if you don't mind me
I have about
asking?
2,000, I think.
Oh, well, that's good.
Um,
That's pretty good. On Subs, do you have other newsletters or only
no,
Substack?
I canceled the Mailchimp because at a certain point, once you have so many people, you start paying too much on Mailchimp, like to send out a newsletter. That seems silly. So I've actually, this was like a great milestone to me as I started making as much on Substack as I was paying to my Mailchimp. And so now instead of paying MailChimp, I'm making the money, which felt, I mean, it's not a lot, but it still felt good.
You
um,
have paid subscribers, right?
a few. I think I have maybe 20 paid subscribers.
That's good. That's good.
Um,
I only have four. so,
it
so
feels exciting. And like when I think about like, oh, how can I just do more of what's working? It feels like Substack's working. So I'm still,
hmm.
figuring it out. I don't have some like grand plan and I don't think anyone could predict like this is you do X, Y, and Z, and then you will produce this result. Like, it's still very much growing and changing, and there's a lot out of your control. But I think there's a lot of writers on there, and it's really helpful to know other writers. It's helpful to know writers outside of your genre and to get inspired by them. It's a lively community. I've tried Blue Sky, and I just, like, so far have not been able to get into it. So I'm liking it so far.
Good. So before we conclude, and since you're the book therapist, what are your top tips for therapy when when people come to you and tell you, like, I can't write, I doubt myself, what are your top tips that you give your patients?
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, the biggest takeaway I want people to know is you're not alone. Like, so many
mm,
people struggle with this. I struggle with this. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's still hard. And there is nothing you can tell me that is going to make me think you're a bad person or you're a bad writer. Like, I think there's just a lot of shame and baggage that comes from trying to do something that is so undervalued and so invisible. And the publishing industry is, like, not transparent. There's so many um, layers to it that are out of your control. It is a recipe for making you feel kind of crazy and just frustrated and wanting to give up. I know so many writers that want to give up, like, which is just that always kills me, because these are really talented people. These are people that have a lot of success. Like, they're the people that other people would look up to, and it still feels really hard for them. So I think
do you know how many times I wanted to give up? So many times, which is, that's why I laugh when you mention it. Like, I said, I'm gonna quit writing maybe at least 100 times, but I get back to it because it's what I love. I cannot let go of it.
you miss it. And,
Yeah,
like, I think
yeah,
it's really good to take that break and realize you miss it.
yeah,
And I am often trying to encourage people to create a writing practice they love and that they want to return to, and that they feel really proud of what they're doing, but also that they enjoy. And then try to just forget about the publishing process. Like, I can give you, professional advice on that, but there's just so much that is going to be out of your control. You have to make peace with the part that comes before that and then let go, because you
yeah,
will make yourself just want to walk away if you focus on the publishing part of it.
yeah,
But the writing part of it is really important and life-giving, and people need to put their work out in the world. There's so much value too in, like, hearing someone, like, saw your work and was really moved by it, and it doesn't need to be 1,000 people. It needs to be, like, one person that just wrote to you and said, like, hey, that actually stuck with me and I thought it was beautiful, and thanks for saying something I didn't know how to say. That can keep you going.
yeah, yeah. Fascinating. So how do people find you? Like, if I'm looking for a book therapist, where can I find you? Your website? Like, where are you? Where do you hang out the most?
Yes. I am at helloheidifiedler.com. That's Fiedler. And I'm at Instagram at Heidi Fiedler. And on Substack, I think you could search Heidi Fiedler, but you can also search for Nebula Notebook. And that's where the Oliver Berkman Book Club is if you want to join it. It's called 4,000 Ideas.
Oh wow, okay. I will have to read the book first. I think I have it here somewhere. But I collect books more than I read them. But but
I
that's
understand.
but anyway, this has been wonderful, Heidi. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really inspired now. And I hope anyone who's listening are and watching, get the same inspiration that I got. And for people who are listening or watching, thank you for joining us for another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. And until we meet again.